I never thought my family would turn against me, but as I stood in that fancy boardroom, staring at my Uncle James's angry, red face, I realized family doesn't always have your back. You have no right to be here, Alexandra, Uncle James shouted, his voice booming in the quiet room. Security, get my niece out of here. The two security guards looked uncomfortable. They'd known me since I was a kid running around this office. Before they could act, I raised my hand. Actually, as a major shareholder of Blackwell Enterprises, I have every right to be here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was racing, especially since we're talking about the missing $4.7 million from our accounts. Let me explain. I'm Alexandra Blackwell. 3 months ago, I was the Chief Financial Officer, CFO, of Blackwell Enterprises, the company my grandfather built from nothing into a $200 million business. After my dad died unexpectedly last year, I stepped up to help run the family business with my uncle, who became CEO, but what I found in the financial records kept me up at night. Growing up, I knew the family business was important. My grandfather, Richard Blackwell, started it all in 1965 with one truck and a dream. By the time I was born, Blackwell Enterprises had built half the city. My earliest memories are of sitting on my dad's lap in his office, looking at blueprints. Remember, Alex, my dad would say kindly but seriously, this company isn't just about buildings, it's about trust. People trust us with their dreams. I took that lesson to heart. After getting my MBA, I joined the company and worked my way up through every department, just like my dad wanted. You earn respect by knowing this business inside and out, he always said. By age 30, I was the youngest CFO the company ever had, working right beside my dad, who had taken over as CEO after my grandpa retired. We made a good team. Dad was the big picture guy, everyone loved him. I was the one keeping track of the money, making sure we grew steadily. Then the accident happened. Dad went to inspect one of our construction sites, just like he did every month, but something went wrong, and the scaffolding collapsed. They said it was an accident, but it left Blackwell Enterprises without its heart and soul. At the funeral, Uncle James put his arm around me. Don't worry, Alex, we'll get through this together. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my dad's brother, my godfather, the man who taught me to ride a bike and brought me ice cream when I was sick. I trusted him completely. 2 weeks after the funeral, the board made Uncle James the CEO. It made sense. He had been the Chief Operating Officer, COO, for years. I stayed on as CFO, trying to keep things steady during such a hard time. I threw myself into work, wanting to keep my dad's dream alive. Uncle James seemed just as committed, working late and making big business plans. But during one of my financial reviews, I found something strange. Payments to a company called Oceanic Consulting Group, 5 transfers over 3 months, adding up to $4.7 million. What's Oceanic Consulting? I asked in a meeting. Uncle James didn't even look up. New consultants. They're helping us expand into the Asian market. I don't remember approving that expense, I said. He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. The board approved it while you were taking care of your mom. We didn't want to bother you. It seemed reasonable. I had spent a week with my mom, who was having a hard time after Dad died, but something still felt wrong. I asked Diane, our corporate secretary, for the meeting notes. What meeting? She replied, looking confused. That night, I dug through the records. I found out Oceanic Consulting Group was created only 3 months ago, with an address in the Cayman Islands, and its only director, JB Holdings. James Blackwell Holdings. My uncle was stealing from our company. I spent the next week collecting evidence, carefully recording every shady transaction. It wasn't just the payments to Oceanic. There were other things: inflated project costs, fake subcontractors, properties bought at low prices and sold for big profits to shell companies. Altogether, nearly $12 million had been taken from Blackwell Enterprises since my dad's death. The night before I planned to show my findings to the board, Patricia Winters, the board chairperson and my dad's oldest friend, called me. Alexandra, I need to see you in my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. It's urgent. Why, Patty? I asked, feeling nervous. It's better if we talk in person. When I arrived the next morning, the whole executive committee was there. Uncle James sat next to Patricia, looking serious but smug. Alexandra, Patricia said formally, we have serious concerns about financial issues under your management as CFO. I felt like someone had punched me. What? She slid a folder toward me. These documents show evidence of financial misconduct, possibly embezzlement. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The documents were altered to make it look like I was the one stealing from the company. This is impossible, I said. These records have been faked. We had 2 independent auditors review them. Another board member said, "It looks pretty convincing, Alexandra." I glanced at my uncle. He looked at me with a disappointed expression so perfect it had to be rehearsed. "James is behind this," I said, my voice shaking. "He's been stealing from the company for months. I have proof." "Alex," Uncle James interrupted, sounding gentle, "we're all struggling after your father's death, but accusing me to cover your own mistakes? That's low." "Due to these accusations," Patricia said, "the board has voted to suspend you until a full investigation is done. You need to hand over all your company devices before you leave." I looked at the board members, people who had known me my entire life, but none of them stood up for me, except Gerald Thompson, my dad's old friend, who looked thoughtful but said nothing. I stood up, feeling like I'd lost everything. "You're making a terrible mistake." As I walked away, Uncle James caught up with me at the elevator. "You should have stayed focused on the numbers and left the big decisions to me," he whispered. "Your father always knew you weren't cut out for real leadership." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, his cruel words echoing in my mind. "Enjoy your early retirement." As the elevator doors closed, my uncle's mocking words echoed in my mind. The next 3 months were the worst of my life. The investigation dragged on, controlled by my uncle to keep me away from the company. The board froze my shares, so I couldn't vote or sell them. My reputation was ruined. No one wanted to hire a CFO accused of stealing money. But I didn't give up. I still had friends at Blackwell Enterprises, people loyal to my father and suspicious of how quickly my uncle turned against me. They helped me gather evidence, piece by piece. I also reached out to Gerald Thompson, the one board member who seemed to doubt my guilt. We met at his fishing cabin, far from prying eyes. "I always thought something was strange about your father's accident," Gerald said, watching the sunset over the lake. "The safety systems at that site were top-notch. Your dad made sure of it." A chill ran down my spine. "You think it wasn't an accident?" Gerald sighed. "I don't know, but your uncle took control so quickly, like he was ready for it." "Help me, Gerald," I said. "Help me get back into that boardroom." 3 months later, I stood before the Blackwell Enterprises board, uninvited but determined, with Gerald by my side and a flash drive full of evidence in my hand. "The quarterly shareholders meeting is public," Gerald reminded the security guards who tried to stop me. "Ms. Blackwell is still a major shareholder." Facing my uncle's furious gaze, I felt strangely calm. "I have proof," I said, holding up the flash drive. "Proof that not only clears my name but also shows where the missing $4.7 million went, and the other $7.3 million that disappeared after that." Uncle James laughed, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "This is ridiculous. The board has already seen the evidence against you." "They saw what you wanted them to see," I said. "Fake documents, manipulated records, but they haven't seen this." Gerald plugged the flash drive into the projector. On the screen appeared banking records, ownership documents, and property transfers, all neatly organized. "Oceanic Consulting Group," I explained, "is owned by JB Holdings, which is controlled by James Blackwell. The $4.7 million went straight into his personal accounts." The boardroom erupted. Uncle James yelled over the noise, his face red with rage. "This is slander. She made all of this up." Patricia Winters, the board's chairperson, banged her gavel. "Order, we need order." When the room quieted, she turned to me. "Alexandra, these are serious claims. How can we verify this?" I smiled for the first time in months. I expected that question. That's why I invited forensic accountants who were waiting outside with a court order to access Blackwell's systems. Uncle James lunged at me, but the security guards held him back. "You'll regret this," he spat, echoing the words I'd said to him months ago. "I don't think I will," I replied calmly. For the next 4 hours, the accountants worked while the board waited, and my uncle sat in furious silence. When the lead accountant returned, her expression was grim. "Ms. Blackwell's allegations are confirmed. The funds were transferred to entities controlled by Mr. James Blackwell." The boardroom fell silent. "There's more," the accountant continued. "We also found proof that Mr. Blackwell falsified safety inspection reports at several construction sites, including the one where Robert Blackwell died." The room went dead quiet. The truth hit me like a punch. Patricia's voice shook. Are you saying? Yes, the accountant said. There's enough evidence for a criminal investigation into both financial crimes and possible negligent homicide. Uncle James jumped up and ran for the door but was caught by two detectives who had arrived after the accountants called them. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with pure hatred. It would have terrified me before. Now, I just felt sorry for him. The board needs to hold an emergency meeting, Patricia said, her voice steadier now. Alexandra, please wait outside. I left the room, exhausted but victorious. Gerald joined me in the hallway. Your father would be proud, he said, patting my shoulder. You fought for the truth, just like he always did. An hour later, Patricia came out of the boardroom. The board has voted to reinstate you, Alexandra, not as CFO, but as acting CEO, effective immediately. We have a lot of work to do to fix the damage and restore your reputation. We're truly sorry for what happened. I thought about walking away, but then I remembered all the employees who depended on Blackwell Enterprises, all the projects my father cared about, and the legacy my grandfather built. I accept, I said, but on one condition. What is it? We create the Robert Blackwell Memorial Fund for construction safety, and we fund it with every penny my uncle stole. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Consider it done. The following months were tough. The company's reputation took a hit when the scandal went public. Several projects were delayed for safety reviews, and my uncle's legal battles exposed even more corruption. But we survived. More than that, we became stronger, more transparent, and more committed to the values my father and grandfather built the company on. A year later, I stood on a podium at the grand opening of Blackwell Plaza, my father's dream project. Some tried to destroy our legacy, I told the crowd, but they learned the hard way that a foundation built on lies will always collapse. Later, sitting in my father's old office, I looked out over the city skyline and whispered, "We did it, Dad. The company is safe, and so is your legacy." Deep down, I felt his pride, his love, and the strength he had passed on to me.